I built a pillar over against the city gate, and I flayed all the chiefs who had revolted, and I covered the pillar with their skins. Some I impaled upon the pillar on stakes, and others I bound to stakes around the pillar. I cut the limbs off the officers who had rebelled. Many captives I burned with fire, and many I took as living captives. From some I cut off their noses, their ears, and their fingers. Of many I put out their eyes. I made one pillar of the living, and another of heads, and I bound their heads to tree trunks round about the city. Their young men and maidens I consumed with fire. The rest of their warriors I consumed with thirst in the desert of the Euphrates. These are the translated words of Ashurnasirpal II, his own description detailing the aftermath of a suppressed revolt. This ancient king was one of the most successful of the Assyrian Empire, as well as one of its cruelest, with a reputation for brutality, namely his sadistic punishments for those who defied him. Ashurnasirpal II ruled from 883 to 859 BC, during what's considered to be the Neo-Assyrian period. By the time he came to power, he inherited a large empire and a formidable army. He was an ambitious king, but also one who knew that before the conquest of new lands could occur, he first had to consolidate his own lands already within his possession. One of his roles as king was to rid his lands of chaos and bring order, stability, and prosperity to his people. Most notably, this involved the king personally putting down rebellions against his rule, which he embarked on a campaign early on in his reign to do so. The consequences of bringing the king's wrath would be severe, with treachery receiving no mercy, met only with the creative and depraved fury of their unforgiving sovereign. Ashurnasirpal II is perhaps best known today for the elaborate, brutal descriptions written himself regarding his own deeds. These are inscribed in the wall reliefs within his palace. These inscriptions are the primary source of what is known about the king's life. The reliefs tell the tale of a powerful king, the embodiment of the god's will. Ashurnasirpal II details how he traveled across the empire as he crushed revolts and punished those disloyal to him, taking pride in the sheer brutality of his deeds, as well as the atrocities committed upon his enemies. On his campaign to consolidate his empire, he travels from city to city, either collecting a large tribute and sworn allegiance, or enacting severe punishment on the disloyal. In the inscriptions, we are told the fate the king brought down upon his subjects. For those who dare oppose him, they may be met with sword and fire, their cities razed into ruins, their leaders publicly flayed alive, their skins used to decorate city walls. Fighting men may be flayed alive as well, impaled, or their eyes gouged out and limbs cut off. Women may be taken captive, and quite often, young children would be burned alive, ensuring the city would have no future, as all that was left in his wake was mounds of debris and piles of corpses. One of the very many examples of such a deed occurred early in his campaign. Ashurnasirpal II learned that the city of Suru had disposed of their governor, killing and replacing him with a king of their own. In response to this treachery, Ashurnasirpal II marched upon the city to enact the punishment of the gods. The inscription reads, "The nobles and elders of the city came out to me in order to save their own lives. They grasped my feet and said, 'If it pleases you, kill. If it pleases you, spare. If it pleases you, do what you will.' I captured their king, the son of a nobody. With my staunch heart and fierce weapons, I besieged that city. All of the guilty soldiers were seized and handed over to me. I sent my magnates into his palace and temples. I carried off his treasures, valuables, women, and daughters, captives of the guilty soldiers together with their property, his chariot and horses, his oxen and sheep, his valuable tribute, which, like the stars of the heavens, had no number." After plundering the possessions of the guilty, taking treasures and captives, Ashurnasirpal goes on to describe their fate. I erected a pile in front of the city gate. I flayed as many as had rebelled against me and draped their skin over the pile. Some I spread out within the pile. Some I erected on stakes upon it, and some I placed on stakes around it. I flayed many right through my land and draped their skins over the walls. I slashed the flesh of the eunuchs and of the royal eunuchs who were guilty. I brought their leader to Nineveh, flayed him, and draped his skin over the city wall. While exact punishments varied between cities, the sadism displayed was always at a high level. With the mass of my troops and my fierce battle, I besieged and conquered the city. I struck down 800 of their combat troops with the sword, and I burned with fire 3,000 captives. I did not leave one of them alive as a hostage. I made a pile of their corpses, and I burned with fire their adolescent boys and girls. I destroyed, devastated, and burned with fire that city. I captured alive their city ruler. I flayed him, and draped his skin over the wall of another city. One reason for the over-the-top cruelty was to discourage any future rebellions or insubordination to take place. The rebel leader may be taken to another city to be flayed, and his skin draped over the walls as a warning. The inscriptions also show that bowing at the king's feet, effectively embracing the divine will of the king, was possible for the non-guilty. These cities and people may get off comparatively easier, spared from the bloodshed and fire at least, but still subjected to heavy taxes and forced to pay large tribute to the king, including livestock, wine, and forced labor. In fact, it seems the extreme tribute demanded by the monarch was a reason for the continuous rebellions, despite the hammer being brought down brutally every time. Through fear alone, the king could then force upon his subjects his will. Still, Ashurnasirpal II makes it clear that should carnage be his judgment, should cities choose insubordination, then nothing will stop his wrath and his highly capable and advanced army. The city was well fortified, and it was surrounded by 3 walls. The people put their trust in their strong walls and their large number of troops. They did not come down to me and grasp my feet. In strife and conflict, I besieged and conquered that city. I struck down 3,000 of their fighting men with the sword. I carried off prisoners, possessions, oxen, and cattle from them. I burned with fire many captives from them. I captured many troops alive. From some, I cut off their arms, their hands, and from others, I cut off their noses, ears, and extremities. I gouged out the eyes of many troops. I made one pile of the living, and one of heads. I hung their heads on trees around that city. I burned with fire their adolescent boys and girls. I destroyed, devastated, and burned with fire that city, and thus I consumed it completely. Even a fortified city in the mountains could not repel the king. I then besieged and conquered those mountain peaks. Within that mighty mountain, I massacred them. I dyed the mountain red like red wool with their blood, and the ravines and torrents of the mountain swallowed the rest of them. I carried off captives and possessions from them. I cut off the heads of their fighters and built a tower before their city. I burned with fire their adolescent boys and girls. There are many such examples in the inscriptions, as the words of Ashurnasirpal II are filled with both pride and malice, as he boasts of his might and ruthlessness. As his campaigns turned to conquest, Ashurnasirpal II annexed new lands, relocating the locals across his empire and installing loyal governors in an effort to prevent potential revolts. During his 24-year reign and across his 14 military campaigns, Ashurnasirpal was very successful, cruel, but successful in his endeavors. He solidified his hold on his empire through force. He amassed enormous wealth through spoils and tribute, as well as subjugated new people. He also formed diplomatic relations with powerful neighbors like Babylonia. His campaigns reached as far as the Mediterranean Sea, where he symbolically washed his weapons in its waters. While his military actions make up a large portion of the inscriptions, and are perhaps what he is mostly known for today, he is also famous for less vile actions as well. One major thing Ashurnasirpal II did was move his capital to the city of Kalhu, a historically important settlement, but at this point just ruins. He rebuilt the city from the ground up into an extravagant one, meant to surpass that of his ancestors. The new capital was a new population, consisting of relocated people from across his empire. The project was a massive undertaking with very impressive results, transforming ruins into a thriving metropolis, complete with walls, temples, gardens, a zoo, and of course, the Grand Palace itself, inside of which not only housed the royalty, but the reliefs that decorated the walls and told the story of Ashurnasirpal II and his victories. One of the better things Ashurnasirpal is known for is the extravagant feast thrown to celebrate the city's completion in 879 BC. Not just a notable feast for its time, but one of the greatest parties of all time. The king invited the surrounding populace, as well as foreign dignitaries, to attend and ordered that the details be recorded onto what's known today as the banquet stela. By his own count, 69,574 people attended this party for 10 days. The expansive menu contained many exotic animals and delicacies, including, but not limited to, 1,000 oxen, 1,000 calves, 10,000 fattened sheep, 15,000 lambs, 500 stags, 500 gazelles, 1,000 ducks, 500 geese, thousands of birds, including 10,000 doves, 10,000 assorted fish, 10,000 assorted eggs, 10,000 loaves of bread, 10,000 jars of beer, 10,000 skins of wine, hundreds of crates and jars of vegetables, fruits, spices, honey, cheese, nuts, and more. Ashurnasirpal then showed off his palace to his guests, including the reliefs decorating it, detailing his mighty life, and perhaps showing them what he is capable of when provoked. He let them feast free of charge, bathe, and then sent them home happy. Although the name Ashurnasirpal II remains a mostly obscure name in the West, he is a very interesting figure from history, but one that has to be considered one of the cruelest kings, not just of ancient Assyria, but of all of human history. One thing that is notable about Ashurnasirpal II is that his ruthless deeds were written in his own words, to be celebrated or feared, words that he desired to be remembered for centuries to come, just as his grand feast and marvelous palace. Not the words of an oppressed people describing their tyrant, but the words of a tyrant describing the consequences of defiance. I erected a wall in front of the great gate of the city. I flayed the chiefs and covered this wall with their skins. Some of them were walled in alive in the masonry. Others were impaled along it. I flayed a great number of them in my presence, and I clothed the wall with their skins. I collected their heads in the form of crowns, and their corpses I pierced in the shape of garlands. My figure blooms on the ruins. In the glutting of my rage, I find my content.